Seattle. We're joined by Eric Galko, someone who is saturated before, during, and after the NFL draft from OptimumScouting.com with Craig and Paul. And I'm David Smoke. Eric, thank you so much for your time. Do you just crash and burn after the draft is over?
No, we're, I was on the East-West Shrine Bowl, and we're on to next year's scouting for next year's players. So we've been doing it for a while, and the draft is fun to see where our guys end up and where each NFL team usually does, but right now it's on the next year a little bit. But certainly it's a long process and a grind, and it starts May 1st, 2022 into this year's draft, and now it starts May 1st, 2023 into next year's.
Eric, was there anything in particular, let's just go to round one, I know it's been a few days, but anything in particular with round one that like just you kind of raised your eyes and went, what?
I think the Detroit Lions, that's the right team, the Detroit Lions, and kind of where they took guys. And I think they're really the only team in the NFL now that really kind of put positional value away to the guys that they liked. And, it's easy to say the Lions made a mistake or did something wrong. But if you remember, they've drafted pretty well the last few years. They got Penei Sewell. They've drafted the right players in each round. So I think they've earned a lot of respect. But I think this is a front office and a coaching staff now that is trying to go from building a culture and putting talent in the locker room into building a Super Bowl contender. They feel themselves that way. So going running back and linebacker made a lot of sense in 2003, not as much in 2023, but I think they're a team that feels they're only a few pieces away from being great. So it's certainly intriguing. Not as like good or bad, just definitely I was intrigued by that like most people were.
What did you think of what the Cowboys maybe did early on, especially with Mazi Smith, Luke Schoonmaker, Damarian Overshown?
Yeah, I think Mazi Smith has a ton of upside. And if you told me or anybody that in, 5-6 years, he's one of the best players, especially defensive players from this draft, I think scouts wouldn't tell you that'd be crazy. He's got that type of athletic upside, the tools to get better. He's somewhere between a Chris Jones kind of impact player that the Chiefs have, as well as a guy like DJ Raji, who was a staple for the Packers for a long time. And again, he's got to make some strides to get there and kind of play more consistently, but the upside it's hard to find at that position. I thought that was a great pick if they wanted to pass on tight end at that time. And they got a guy that played the East-West Shrine Bowl this year, Luke Schoonmaker, in the late second round, who, for my money, was one of the best ends in the entire draft. And I think he's one of the few complete tight ends. I think after Michael Mayer, Luke was kind of the next guy that you can trust as a blocker, short area receiver, and downfield pass catcher in the entire draft. I think those two picks were still two big needs for them. They got two guys I think can start right away and still have a lot upside to go. Again, Mazi Smith and Luke Schoonmaker, along with being from Michigan, were two of the best athletes at their position in the entire draft.
Eric, where did you stand on DeMarvion Overshown? Incredible athlete, super long guy. Seems like he'd fit really well in the league. Obviously, third round's a nice spot as well. But what did you think about just the fit there in Dallas with him? And what were some things you liked and maybe didn't like about his game?
Yeah, I think a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, way Overshown was kind of projecting, looked like a first-round pick kind of guy. And I think for him, it's a matter of being consistent and really putting it all together, going from a guy that has the length and physicality to win run fits and then consistently winning in run fits, the guy that can match up with tight ends, running backs in the backfield, and then doing it with good footwork and timing. So I think for him, it's a matter of can he do it on a consistent basis, because when it's right, he is an NFL starting linebacker and one of the rare tools guys at that position. Just hasn't been right consistently at Texas. Again, this is a guy that the Cowboys love to target, the guys that were either five-star recruits or were ascending up and just haven't got to that peak yet. And I think with the year of coaching and kind of playing a rotational role and seeing how it's done right in an NFL system, again, this is the guy that we could be looking at in 4 or 5 years saying, yep, he was one of the best linebackers from the entire draft class. So a lot of upside there. I think there's questions on if he'll actually reach it because he started so many games at Texas. But talent-wise, upside-wise, this guy has NFL starting level ability and then some.
Eric, if he's going to be inconsistent or has been inconsistent, and you're right, he could be a highlight reel, and then all of a sudden you couldn't find him. Is that something you would do in the third round?
Absolutely. I think and a guy like him that, at worst for Overshown is going to be a really quality multi-linebacker positional backup, right? He can offer value at multiple linebacker spots. He's done it at Texas, played a few different roles. He's got the length, the physicality to be a good special teamer. Like, that's his floor as a player in this team. He's going to be on the roster his entire rookie deal unless something else happens, and probably then some if they want him. And the upside being a guy that has flash starter level ability, even if you're somewhere in the middle, that's great value for a third round pick. And he has first round upside and probably third, fourth round floor as a quality backup rotational player. So I thought it was a great pick. I thought he'd go in round 2 based on all those factors. So getting him in round 3, if they get a starter out of him, it's really gravy at that point.
You are at the East-West Shrine Bowl, Eric, and one of the players I thought was the most intriguing coming out of your game because he wasn't invited to the Combine and then started to get some buzz. Chandler Zavala from NC State got drafted eventually by the Panthers. Really started to heat up after your game in Vegas.
Yeah, he was a guy who had 15 players from the Shrine Bowl this year not get invited to the Combine and still get drafted. And it's one of those things where I think NFL teams just were late on him. That's what NFL Combine invites mean, is that at least half the league wants to see in Indianapolis, and more than half the league didn't want to see Chandler. I think he proved at the Shrine Bowl and the whole process. I mean, that poor kid, I think at the end of the day, he had about 28 team visits between late March and late April. I mean, that kid was exhausted, but everybody wanted to see him and not at the Combine. So he was one of the best players we had all week long, too. I think if he was a Combine invite and had all those medicals done and teams felt comfortable with him, he may have been a second, maybe early third round pick. So one of our bright spots for sure of a guy who actually used the game to catapult himself up from a guy teams weren't familiar with or kind of rejected to a guy that teams couldn't wait to get a hold of on early 3.
Eric, what's that process like? I mean, not only, obviously studying guys and scouting guys and then inviting them and all of that, but just that week of getting to be around them, how much more insight does that provide?
It does, and I think it's a good microcosm, the All-Star game process in general, and how the NFL scouting process works. And I talk to Cowboy scouts, I talk to every scout throughout the year and kind of combining their feedback and their notes. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to put the best players in the field for them to draft. I don't get to draft the team. So it's about working with them, but also kind of helping them and being a second cross-check of sorts to say, hey, here are the guys you wanted to see. Here's maybe 20, 30 guys you maybe didn't want to see yet, but just trust us, give them a try and see if they're good fits as well, too. So I think it's really valuable for all-star games, not just to kind of see the top guys and enjoy them, not just to see the guys that are fighting for draft spots and who could be the best of the receiver group or offensive line group. But I think it's really about finding guys that maybe you didn't like in the season, seeing them do something else, and then seeing if they thrive. Chandler Zavala is a good example. He played left guard and right guard, dominated against nose tackles and edge rushers, and was really impressive all week long. Kobe Turner of Wake Forest was an FCS transfer, went to Wake Forest, didn't start, came to the Shrine Bowl, crushed it, went 87th in the draft with no Combine invite. So all-star games are really valuable process for the teams for all different reasons, and I think the guys are able to help themselves in that draft process.
2 undersized college football players that we got to watch a lot, and one of them we covered in high school, Tre'Vius Hodges-Tomlinson, who went to the Rams in round 6. Deuce Vaughn, the great emotional call from his father for the Cowboys in round 6. Your thoughts about either one of them, and did you think that's about where both would go?
First off, so cool about Deuce and his dad and that moment. I think everyone is unanimously agreement that's a cool moment. And I think it's impressive because I heard the same thing the Cowboys had said where his dad wasn't involved in any discussions about Deuce as a player. And they drafted him on his merits and his fit with the team, not for any sort of favors, which is even further validation of how impressive Deuce was. Because I bet he got an extra critical eye from that staff. So I think he fits in. Certainly the Cowboys need a running back too to step up with Zeke off the roster and Tony being the guy. So they need someone to step up. And I think Deuce won't be the guy that can handle the ball 10, 15 times a game, but I think in a 7 to 10 spot, he definitely could. And I think the Eagles using Boston Scott the way they do could be a good, I think, idea of how they could utilize Deuce Vaughn in Dallas. And then Trey, Trey came to the East-West Shrine Bowl as well. He was still banged up in the season, so wasn't able to go and practice, but talk with every NFL team. And I think NFL teams just saw that, hey, it's cliche sometimes, but this guy just knows football. He knows when to go off his coverage and make a play by himself, or he knows when to blitz when maybe the play isn't called for, but he just has the instincts to do it. He can cover running backs, can cover receivers, can situationally play some zone against tight ends, can go off zone and go off script and make plays as well too. I think I always felt both those guys were going to get drafted despite their size because they just really know how to play football and can fill a specific role. For the Rams, Trey is a perfect fit for their defense. They've always had guys like him the last 3-4 years. For Deuce, they need a running back, and he's the only guy in the roster who can do the kind of things that he does besides Tony.
Is there any doubt whatsoever that if the draft was held tomorrow, hypothetically held tomorrow, Caleb Williams would be the first pick in the draft?
There is a very small amount of doubt. I think Drake May is a pretty special player. I think Caleb has a high expectation right now, and he's going to be, I'll tell you right now, he's going to be victim to some over-evaluation here at some point where everyone's going to constantly wondering not how good Caleb is. We're sure he's the top guy, but I'd be pretty surprised when it's all said and done based off Caleb Williams, knowing him as a person as well as a player and talking with him many times already. That kid is special, and I'd certainly bet my future on Caleb Williams as best I could. So I think we'll see a team, if not taking first overall, trade up a lot to get him first overall if they need a quarterback.
Eric, best overall draft is very subjective, but the state of Pennsylvania, to me, in my opinion, the Eagles and Steelers looked like they drafted guys who within a year will all be starters.
Yeah, I mean, the Philadelphia Bulldogs at this point, right? All the Georgia guys they took credit for DeAndre Swift. And, there's two areas where it's really easy to be a good drafter. It's one, if you don't need a quarterback and you're picking high, right? The Arizona Cardinals had a great draft. Third overall pick. They could trade down and get a king's ransom, get some future picks, and look great. The Packers have their quarterback and trading a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and getting a lot of value. It's really easier when you're in a spot that's a high value and don't need a quarterback. But secondly, it's when you're the Eagles team that's already has a loaded roster, you can kind of pick just off value. To be honest, they didn't really need Jalen. They don't have a glaring need. They have Jordan Davis. They've got some older guys. They could have fix that spot how they wanted to, but they got a guy like him to fill in. They didn't really need Nolan Smith. There other edge rushers like him, but they said, you know what, he's there, we'll take him. And I think when you can draft for pure strategy and pure value, it's hard to lose. A lot of teams didn't need an undersized edge rusher, neither did the Eagles, but they had no other needs. They can fill that. So I think the Eagles especially look like a team like, hey, they're playing with house money, and everyone wants to play there as a free agent, and drafting the way they did and getting some freak athletes. Again, if Jalen Carter's your defensive tackle 3 because he hasn't really panned out, they're still okay. They'll still be a Super Bowl contender, and that's going to be just fine for them.
Eric, if you don't mind, like an inside the war, have you ever experienced? I know the war room is like trying to get into a vault, but have you ever had kind of an idea of the atmosphere? A team's about to draft, and they're like next in line, and the team in front of them takes who they want. How quickly do they react to that? I know you have to still have a list of 1 through 10. You got to be ready for anything that happens. But how much is there any kind of semi-chaos or panic when that happens?
No, I think a lot of teams do these mock drafts a lot. A lot of teams do mock drafts. Something I talk to teams all about is mock drafting. And hey, let's go through scenarios. Let's share notes. Hey, who do we think these teams might take? That's something I do a lot with teams, and that's kind of how. When I do mock drafts, I do much more for teams than I do in the media because that's how you ought to operate these things. So, certainly there's some remorse, and you'll never hear from the team, yeah, we wanted that guy, we just missed him, we settle for this player. You'll never hear that, but it happens a lot. And I think when you see teams trade up to a spot, 9 times out of 10, they were dead right on that to go to that spot. I know the Cowboys said they didn't want a tight end, and they kind of played that, and maybe they did. But I think 9 times out of 10, you can assume that when a team trades up above one team, and they take a certain player, 9 out of 10 times the other team is saying, we messed up here. We got to get somebody else too. But teams are prepared and teams are able to pivot pretty well. And that's why you see a little bit less trades late day 3, because at that point you just got to keep going and move on to the next one. You're not as well.
Eric, you have been in the business now for what is a pretty good time. We've known you for quite some time. What is right now your level of confidence where you are, what you've learned, and also what teams do as far as leaning on you for some advice or at least some insight or what you might have in your head?
Yeah, it's been fun in this job at the Shrine Bowl the last 2 years in that I kind of have unique information for teams, especially on our Shrine Bowl players, but I think also on who these players are, not the Shrine Bowl, and guys, how they're handling the transfer portal, who their agent selection process has been, how they handle certain things professionally. And teams don't kind of get that until these guys go to the combine or pro day or have them in their building. And I'm getting that now. I'm talking to these players, families, if they reach out, certainly colleges, and being able to kind of get ahead of this and really help teams in that way has been fun, but also great. I joke all the time, agents will sign 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. I got 130 clients. I'm rooting for these guys. I'm sweating bullets. I'm helping them pick a team after the draft. I'm talking with them in training camp and catching up. And that's been a great part about this job, is building a relationship with guys. But certainly in the team sense, helping teams kind of have more information is a cool part that I'm thankful to play a role in.
Appreciate your time, Eric. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Thanks, guys.
That's Eric Galko, Optimum Scouting, handles the